This is the Volvo Ocean Race, the story of a 45-year obsession. Sailing's iconic race around the world, the ultimate test of a team, and the place where elite sport meets human adventure. Achieving victory will mean dominating a 45,000 nautical mile race over 11 legs, taking in 12 host cities across 6 continents. 7 international teams are vying to add their name to the Volvo Ocean Race trophy, and at the end of leg 2, 3 returning entries had emerged at the top of the leaderboard. Mafre on a quest to be the first Spanish team to win in 10 attempts. The American-Danish flagged Vestas 11th Hour Racing in the hands of a young US duo. And the class act that is China's Dongfeng race team. Ahead, 6,500 miles of danger and isolation as the race heads back to its roots, the Southern Ocean. Next stop, and the fleet leave Cape Town for Melbourne, Australia, deep into the notorious Southern Ocean. It's a throwback to the race's early editions, a place where the line of risk and racing is razor thin.
I think those Southern Ocean legs give an extra dimension because you're so far from land, you're in a vulnerable spot.
There's only a pit stop in Melbourne, and you have another 20-day leg up to Hong Kong after that.
It's a double pointer, which is risky, and we will need to assess very well the risk of going for the win or don't break the boat.
If you don't be in time in Melbourne, you're going to probably miss the leg from Melbourne to Hong Kong.
In this leg, you think more about safety and what can happen, and especially the horrible situation is a man overboard. It's going to be one of the toughest legs of the Volvo Ocean Race.
The fleet were heading into the most isolated and potentially dangerous seas on the planet. Strike a problem in the Southern Ocean and you're on your own, providing critical incentive to all of the pre-start preparations.
The boats will be tested in every capacity, so we want to make sure that the boats are absolutely fit for purpose. Each boat has up to 400 jobs that are just part of the basic service that we provide all the teams, and then on top of that there's any of the damages that we find caused from the leg that they've just done. Melbourne is a pit stop, and then from there the boats move on up to Hong Kong, so there'll be about 14,500 miles before these boats get the opportunity to get out of the water again.
For all the sailors, preparation was paramount too. Much needed rest, planning and weather routing all as important as the racing itself. Time spent ashore would hopefully pay dividends out on the racetrack.
If you have a really good leg on this one, then we right back up with the overall score. So I know everybody's always giving 100%, but it is just one where we just have to dig in the maximum what we can do.
For friends and family, they knew that the leg ahead would be the hardest yet. The farewells ever more poignant as the crews would head south and into the Southern Ocean. It would be the greatest test for rookies and veterans alike.
Keep easy! Okay!
This is it, the leg. Every round-the-world sailor wants to do the Southern Ocean. Next stop, Melbourne, Australia.
Good weather to be back. Good weather to start a new leg.
With double points on offer, all the teams knew that a good result on this leg would really put them in a good standing early on in the race. They would have to balance risk and reward. Leg 3 is part of the route from the original Whitbread round-the-world race. The fleet would sail south from Cape Town, around the Cape of Good Hope, and then head east into the infamous Southern Ocean, where they will face storm-force winds and huge swells before pointing north to Melbourne for just a week-long respite. The first 24 hours were tough, with wind speeds in excess of 25 knots, before the breeze eased as the fleet crossed a ridge of high pressure.
The next 2 days are probably relatively easy sailing until the low pressure arrives, and then it's game on, 35-40 knots.
As the boats headed east, the fleet split, anticipating heavy winds which were approaching from the west, exactly when they would be diving into the Southern Ocean.
There's ourselves and Scallywag pretty much on top of each other. Dee's about 8 miles back, and then like 20 miles to the south of us we've got the other pack of boats, Dongfeng, Mapfre, Axo and Brunel. It's a fine line between sailing as fast as you can and sailing the optimum course versus sailing in a safe place, minimising risk, looking after the boat and not putting yourself in a position where you could get run over by the load.
As the sea conditions worsened, anticipation grew.
We've got about 24 hours before we know the wind's going to start building and we get our first really big depression that is going to pack a punch. So we're going to just do some safety checks, and safety is obviously paramount for the crew, and especially my responsibility.
But the biggest issue to keep everyone safe will be the amount of water that comes over the deck and the force of the water over the deck, so we need to be careful that, you know, everybody's clipped on.
I'm curious, excited for us, the newbies here. Maybe it's good as well because we have, you only know the stories, you know?
As the seas filled, the team on board Axo Nobel get an early scare. Rookie Emily Nagel becomes the Southern Ocean's first casualty.
There's a nice line down here. So did you land across there?
I think it was completely right. I fell from up on the windward side all the way down, and head first and then feet in the air, and a little bit shaken up and in a bit of pain.
Further north, Sun Hung Kai Scallywag was still hit hard by the weather. Navigator Antonio Fontes, who had replaced Steve Hales, fell heavily on the deck.
I twisted the arm. I don't know how badly, but right now I cannot do nothing with the arm.
We're a long way from any real medical support, so bad impact fracture would be, that'd be really bad.
Just a few days into the leg, and already the ocean was showing who was the boss. Turn the Tide on Plastic were now the most northerly boat in the fleet. Skipper Dee Kafari hoped to avoid the worst of the weather. 70% of her team had never been this far south before.
I'm not at all surprised that some of the teams have gone further south. So we're going through the middle of it, slightly stronger winds and bigger sea state. But if you take Mapfre, for example, they've sailed together 3 times around the world. They have a lot of confidence in each other, a lot of experience, and they know how to manage their boat. But I think we're doing the right thing for our boat. And I think that'll show in the fact that we'll be able to keep sailing our boat and not just go into survival mode.
The race carved its reputation down here in the early years. Skippers routinely trading off the risks of collision with ice for a shorter route. But at today's speeds, a collision with an iceberg would spell disaster. So an Antarctic ice exclusion zone was enforced to prevent the teams from straying into the ice-prone waters. But even with this safety rule, the lure of more wind meant that the leading boats headed as far south as they dared to skirt the exclusion zone.
We're fighting hard with Dongfeng, and of course the others as well. We've been fighting hard with Axo Nobel and Brunel the whole night, and you cannot go slow here because everyone's going to pass us.
Mapfre were chasing the leaders' Dongfeng race team. The rest of the fleet were in hot pursuit. A gap more than 200 miles now stood between the most southerly and the most northerly boat. As the strong Southern Ocean storm started to take hold, extreme wind gusts together with huge waves made life above and below decks ruthless and dangerous.
A lot of time you manage to hang on to the wheel, but sometimes your hands just get ripped off, and then obviously the safety tether takes up hard, and then you sort of land on the floor in a bit of a pile, and then try to regain composure and get back up there.
We're fully in the Southern Ocean now. We've just had 50 knots earlier today, and consistently 45. The waves are huge and it's hard work. And here it's like being inside a washing machine, and this is when it's difficult. So it's not like you go to bed and it turns off. It's always on. But when you're on deck, it's epic.
As the leaders kept to the very edge of the ice exclusion zone, they were forced to continually jibe to keep pace. A risky manoeuvre in the extreme and harsh environment.
It's quite stressful because you try to push as much as possible. In the night it's very difficult to react and you're always scared to break something and the race is finished.
It's a stress that every skipper shares. The smallest mistake comes with huge consequences, as Team Axonabel found out for themselves.
We had a jibe on in some pretty hard conditions, I guess 35 knots, 40, and had a bad one. And I should have pulled out of doing it, and you know, we probably would have broached and something like that, but it wouldn't have been the outcome that we had, which was, you know, the main slamming over on the runners, breaking the battens, which was bad, but the worst part is we've pulled the track off the back of the mast. So guys did an awesome job to get the main down, you know, and then the squalls to 50 knots while we're doing it. So the plan is hopefully get the track glued back on or screwed back on over the next day or two, but it's going to take time.
With no mainsail, it was a crippling blow for the team, and time was already ticking. With just a short pit stop ahead in Melbourne, the pressure was on. Fix the boat, or risk missing the next leg start. As the fleet sailed through the eye of a Southern Ocean storm in leg 3 of the Volvo Ocean Race, both crews and boats were taking a battering. Sunhunkai Scallywag and Team Axonabel had crew members with injuries. Also, Simeon Teampoint's team was scrambling to get back racing after wiping out and wrecking their mast track. The team despondent when their first attempts to repair failed.
It has to be the other stuff.
Track's popped straight off. Obviously couldn't hold in the conditions. So hopefully we'll get it down now and then try it again.
We were in a pretty good position, we're going pretty well. So yeah, major setback will give us a big loss. You know, we're in the middle of nowhere, so to actually keep racing again and get the boat home safe and in time, because that's the biggest challenge, to be in time in Melbourne.
300 miles ahead, Dongfeng race team are leading, continuing their dominance, followed closely by Mafre. With double points at stake, this is a huge opportunity for any of the top teams.
During 30 hours, we are going to jibe every hour, so it's just a nightmare, but we have no choice.
We are sleeping with the wet weather gear on, and every half an hour or an hour we have a maneuver, so then it's a very short time of sleep, and sometimes you get exactly half an hour or 40 minutes of some rest and then back on deck.
Both teams were blasting along the Antarctic ice exclusion zone, taking the shortest route to the finish line in Melbourne. Vestas 11th Hour Racing and Team Brunel in pursuit.
An Antarctic ice exclusion zone, which is a no-go area for us while we're racing. So they create a hard wall, but obviously that means if we cross that wall, we get in trouble and we get a penalty.
Further behind, Sunhunkai Scallywag were making gains despite having one less crew member on deck. Their navigator Antonio Fontes nursing a suspected broken arm after falling earlier in the leg.
We're now 75 miles off the leaders, and we're, you know, Brunel and Vestas are only 14 and 23 ahead of us, so, you know, we just got to keep chipping away.
Fourth place Team Brunel were chasing Vestas 11th Hour Racing, but they also had problems of their own. British sailor Annie Lush suffered a frightening injury and she was thrown by a heavy wave.
It's like a burning pain. I couldn't stand up and I tried to crawl, but I couldn't use my right leg at all, so in the end the guys had to drag me along the deck and then carry me downstairs into the bunk. I feel very bad that I can't help everyone with all this diving.
Lush is bedridden and her situation unclear, but so far from help there's no option but to push on for the closest aid, Melbourne. It's a sobering moment for veteran skipper Bauer Becking.
I think we are 2,000 miles away from Australia and 3,500 away from Madagascar. That's probably the next closest land in the vicinity. It's not easy, you know, helicopter range is normally max 200 miles. It's not only the thing about being the skipper, having that responsibility, but of course as well to comfort the patient as much as possible. So it's always said to motivate the patient to keep fighting, and the race doesn't matter. Racing is coming last on the list. It's about the survival of the patient who you're having.
It was now 3 days since Team Axonabel had broken their mast track. With no mainsail, they had hemorrhaged miles and were at the back of the fleet. but now had finally made a successful repair.
Loaded up the main now, second lube, no dramas. Way better job. I mean, we hold ourselves for 5 minutes, so I gotta be careful, but should be alright. Confidence.
Although the team were up and running, the stark reality started to hit home.
The frustrating part now is we've got to wait for our next opportunity. We probably won't get another opportunity in this league. Sadly, I think we're done. It's not going to stop us trying, but it's going to be really difficult.
The Southern Ocean is one of the most remote places on Earth, but after racing for thousands of miles, the two leaders were in an intense duel, battling within several hundred meters of each other.
Mapfre passes, we repass him, and now we are very close. I think we have maybe more than 30 jives the last 24 hours. So it's a bit a nightmare.
We would like to be in front, of course. I would prefer to be hunted more than be hunting, because this means that you are ahead.
20 minutes, we have a gyro. Maximum 20 minutes.
The contest continued for days, a relentless war of jibes, draining the crews both physically and mentally.
A very brutal leg so far, like it's very demanding conditions, always fast, everything's wet, inside of the boat's horrible. There's water everywhere, there's water in your sleeping bag, there's water in your personal bag, there's water everywhere.
Mapfre eventually retook the lead and slowly edged away from Dongfeng race team, who clung to the lead for 10 days.
We're looking for an opportunity for them to slip up or for us to make some really good moves, and if they make any mistake, we'll be right there to pounce.
For Vestas 11th Hour Racing, the two leaders have become untouchable.
The two red boats up in front, they're about 60 miles up. We're kind of chasing, but we've always got a little bit less wind, so we're not really winning that chase. But the good news is we got Brunel just behind, about 20 miles now.
On board Team Brunel, there was positive news. Annie Lush, who had been injured 3 days earlier, was back on her feet and eager to get back on deck.
Finally out of my bunk after 72 hours. And I can move around. It feels amazing.
A ridge of high pressure with light winds had engulfed the boats further back. Fifth place Sun Hun Kai Scallywag were feeling the pain.
It's been really hard on everybody. We don't even know whether Tony's going to be able to do the next leg with his arm yet. Unless something dramatic happens, I think we're probably going to finish where we are. Not fantastic, but it's not we haven't disgraced ourselves.
After passing the northernmost limit in the ice exclusion zone, the leading boats headed southeast before pointing north towards Melbourne. As the leaders finally headed north out of the Southern Ocean and towards the Melbourne finish, Dongfeng race team go into stealth mode, hiding their position from the fleet in an attempt to catch Mapfre, but to no avail. They emerged nearly 100 miles behind their Spanish team, and to compound their disappointment, they had a problem with their canting keel.
The boat is full of oil, we are all full of oil. And we lost 10 to 15 miles. The situation is really bad. The back of the fleet, I did a completely different option, and it's coming back very fast, so let's hope that will not be the loss to cost us the second place.
In the final push to the finish line, it was the last thing the Chinese team needed, with Team Brunel and Vestas 11th Hour Racing chasing them down.
And they're higher than the last kid? So they're 23 at 173. Next 24 hours, it's all about keeping the yellow one behind us and just catching the red one. We'll see how we go.
For the trailing three boats, Sun Hun Kai Scallywag, Team Axonobel and Turn the Tide on Plastic, their dreams of a podium spot had faded, but they all continued to push hard.
We were surfing down a wave and they got a little bit too low and the rudders jumped in and took us out to leeward and we jibed. And then of course everything's on the wrong side, the stack, the ballast, the keel, the people, the sails, the runner, and it takes a bit of sorting out.
We don't really need to tick that box again if we can help it, but I think everybody dealt with it all right. A few wide eyes.
After 6,500 miles and with a substantial lead over Dongfeng race team in the final days, Mapfre claimed victory for leg 3, their second consecutive leg win, and just in time for Christmas Day.
It puts us in a good position in the leaderboard, but feels very good. People are very happy. I'm very happy, the team. But I think we know very well how much is left in this race and how the things can get wrong. So we have to be very careful, enjoy the moment, of course. So very happy, but very conscious that there's so much left.
Just over 4 hours later, the Chinese team managed to keep their second position despite losing precious miles after difficulties with their keel. But the top spot had eluded them yet again.
I think we improve every day, and if we lead the race during 80%, we should be able to lead for more. So we are going to work on that for the next one. The race is very long, the race is very tough, and lots of things can happen, so we cannot be unhappy of a second place on the double point leg.
Vestas 11th Hour Racing took the final podium spot after a duel with Team Brunel heading towards Melbourne.
Although a podium finish on a double point leg like this, it's pretty expensive, particularly with MAPFRE. So we know what we need to work on. Again, still racing ourselves, so we take care of a couple things and hopefully we can put a chip in that lead by the time we get back to Auckland for another double points experience.
Bauerbecking's Dutch team finished mid-fleet for the second time. A respectable result after a grueling leg, but we're now way off the leaders in terms of overall points. The remaining 3 boats spent their Christmas Day at sea, the spirit of the moment not lost.
Ho, ho, ho! Oh, this is good! I'd like to wish everybody a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year!
Team AkzoNobel were now more than 550 miles away from Melbourne and were still days from finishing. Despite this, the crew were positive, testament to the calibre of sailors in the Volvo Ocean Race.
Honestly, we're not where we want to be right now, and we're in a tough position, we know that. But that being said, I think all sailors in this team and in the Volvo Ocean Race are used to being big holes they have to dig their way out of. And no matter how, I think, deep the hole is, Volvo sailors will always say, I've been a bigger hole, I can dig my way out of this one too. So it's a bit painful that you don't quite get the result you aim for, but you gotta keep your head down and you gotta, keep putting in the effort, because it will change eventually. And always a break for those who wait for it and fight for it.
More than 24 hours after 4th place Brunel arrived, it was the turn of Sun Hung Kai Scallywag and Turn the Tide on Plastic to complete their epic Southern Ocean leg. They were 5th and 6th respectively. Team AkzoNobel eventually finished more than 3 days after first place MAPFRE. Their stopover reduced significantly before the start of the next leg, leaving them little time to recover and repair their boat. Melbourne would be a welcome relief for all the teams after their 6,500 mile ordeal at sea. The double points win means MAPFRE extend their advantage at the top of the leaderboard, 6 points clear of Dongfeng Race Team on equal points with Vestas 11th Hour Racing. The Spanish team were looking strong. Leg 4 will see the Volvo Ocean Race fleet head to Hong Kong. It will be the first time that the race will visit the city in its 45-year history. The teams will head north from Melbourne and race for 6,000 miles. More challenges will lay ahead, but it will be a welcome break from the Southern Ocean.